Hi everybody, it's Carissa, and today I wanted to show you how to create a welt in your knitting. It's this three-dimensional ridge that actually pops out from the fabric of your knitting. Not to be confused with the welt stitch pattern, which is just alternating rows or alternating stripes of stockinette stitch and reverse stockinette stitch. So it creates these horizontal welts that sort of act like ribbing, but in the opposite direction. If you can knit and you can purl, then you can create welt stitch pattern, probably without a video. So that is not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about is creating a welt. And again, if you can knit and you can purl, you can do this, but it's a little bit more fiddly. So essentially it's a flap of stockinette stitch fabric. Sometimes it's other stitch patterns, but most of the time it's going to be stockinette stitch. And once you finish that flap of stockinette stitch, you work each of the live stitches from the top of the welt together with a stitch that you pick up from underneath the welt, and that sort of pinches the fabric and holds it together into that fold that pops out from your knitting and creates a lot of interesting texture. It could also be functional though. You could make a really large welt and actually use it as a channel for a drawstring, thread a drawstring through it. So you can make that at the top of a skirt or a little purse or something like that. So really cool welt. So let's get started. I have a swatch here that I worked an inch or two in my background color, and then I switched colors so that you can really see the welt. So the rows that will be made into that welt, I worked in a different color. And I have 4 rows here, but depending on your pattern, it might be more, it might be fewer. And first I'm going to show you how to finish off the welt on a knit row, on a right side row here. So what we want to do is each of these stitches, each of these live stitches on the needle needs to be worked together with each of the gray stitches from here, from 4 rows down, from below the welt. What we'll do to do that is flip our work over and find those purl bumps that are the tops of our last gray stitch. Now, if all of your stitches are the same color, if your welt is going to be the same color as your fabric, you can count down as well. So 1, 2, 3, 4 purl bumps down. That's the purl bump that you're going to pick up and work together with this stitch on the needle. So let's get started. So first, I want to work this first stitch together with this first gray purl bump here. So what I'm going to do is just use my right hand needle to pick up that purl bump and put it on the left hand needle. And then from the front, I can actually just knit those 2 stitches together. There we go. Now for the second stitch, again, I'm going to look at the back of my work. I'm going to find my next gray purl bump, or I can count downward, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the purl bump we want to pick up. I'm going to put it on my left needle and knit those 2 stitches together before I drop them off my left needle. And if you hold your yarn in the right hand, if you're a continental knitter, it's going to look pretty much the same way. Flip our work over, 1, 2, 3, 4 purl bumps down. Pick up that purl bump. There we go. Put it on the left hand needle. And I'm going to knit those 2 stitches together. The gray purl bump I picked up and the orange live stitch that was on my needle. So one more time, I'm going to count down 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's this purl bump right here. Pick that up, put it on my left hand needle, and then from the front I can just knit those 2 stitches together. And you can see on my right hand needle here below the needle that that welt is starting to form, that ridge of fabric where the orange rows get pinched together, but the gray is still flat. And I'll work my way across doing that with each of these stitches to create that welt. So you can do this, you can pick up the stitches one at a time, or what you can do if you want is to pick up the stitches all at the same time. So I'm going to grab a needle that's a couple sizes smaller than the needles I'm working with, and I'm actually going to turn my fabric around, and I'm going to work my way across and pick up each of those gray purl bumps first before I do any knitting. So again, I'm going to count down 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's this row of purl bumps that I want to pick up. Here I've used different colors, so it's really easy to see. That one on the end is going to look a little bit strange, but that's okay. I can grab him, top of the gray purl bump, and then go downward through each of the purl bumps all the way across the row and just pick up each purl bump. Here we go. And it helps to use a needle that's a couple sizes smaller, just so that it's easier to get into those stitches that have already been knitted once. There we go. So I got all my gray stitches on this needle. Now I can turn my work around. And what we're going to do is to work each of the stitches on the front needle together with each of the stitches I just picked up on this back needle. So I'll insert my right hand needle into the first stitch on the front needle, and then into the first stitch on the back needle as well. And I'm going to knit those two stitches together. So pull it through the stitch on the back needle, pull it through the stitch on the front needle, and then I can drop the old stitch off both of my left hand needles. There we go. So I'm going to do that again. Through the stitch on the front needle, through the stitch on the back needle, and knit the two together. There we go. Drop them off the left-hand needles. So again, you can see my welt starting to form under my right-hand needle. Let me show you a couple continental style. So again, I'm going to take my right-hand needle into the first stitch on the front needle, into the first stitch on the back needle, and I'm going to knit them together. There we go. One more time, through the stitch on the front needle, through the stitch on the back needle, and knit them together. And off the left-hand needles. There we go. And there's my welt starting to form. And you just work your way all the way across the row until each of the stitches on the live stitches on your front needle are worked together with the picked up stitches on your back needle. So that was how to work a welt from the knit side. You can also, and my preference actually, is to work them together on the purl side. So here I have another swatch where I've done the same thing, but I worked one more right side row so that I am actually in position to work a wrong side row next. So when we worked a welt from the knit side, we kept having to flip our fabric over and look for those purl bumps. When you work them from the purl side, it's a little bit easier because those purl bumps are right there on the fabric facing you. So it's a little bit easier. And so again, I want to work each of my live stitches on my left hand needle together with the top of the stitch, this time from 5 rows down because I did that extra orange row to get back to a wrong side row. So here I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows down. So it's these bumps right here that I want to work together with my live stitches on my needle. And again, you can do them one at a time, or you can do them, pick them all up and then work them together. So I'm on a wrong side row, so I'm purling. Now this time we want the orange stitch to be on the right side, visible from the right side of the fabric. So unlike the working the welt from the knit side, where we could pick up that gray bump and put it on the needle and work them together, what we actually want to do is grab the orange stitch from the live needle first, take it off the left needle, just slip it from one to the other purlwise. Then we want to pick up the top of that gray stitch 5 rows down so that the stitches are in the other order. Now we can put them back on our left hand needle. So instead of picking up that gray stitch and putting it on the top of our left hand needle, we want it to be the second stitch on our left hand needle, so that when we work those 2 stitches together, again we're in a purl row, so I'm going to purl those 2 stitches together. There we go. So now by putting that gray stitch as the second stitch instead of the first stitch, that means the orange stitch will be the visible stitch on the front side of the fabric, on the right side of the fabric. So I'll show that to you one more time. We're going to slip that first stitch purlwise. Then we're going to go all the way down, count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches. That's the purl bump we want to grab. Put both of those stitches back on the left hand needle and purl them together. There we go. One more time, slip as if to purl. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows down. We'll pick up that purl bump. There we go. Put both stitches back on the left hand needle and purl them together. And again, we can do this. We can pick up all of the stitches at once if we want to with a slightly smaller needle. So this was the last stitch I did, so I'm going to grab that purl bump and that one. Each of those purl bumps all the way across the row. And again, I'm using a slightly smaller needle just because it's easier to pick up stitches with a slightly smaller needle, because these stitches have already been worked once. Go, and the last one. All right, so we have all of our remaining live stitches in orange that are now going to be on the back needle, and all of our picked up stitches in gray on the front needle. And we want to purl each of those stitches together with its partner. So we're going to go into the orange stitch on the back needle as if to purl, then into the gray stitch on the front needle as if to purl. And we're going to purl those 2 stitches, whoops, lost it, into the back stitch as if to purl, into the front stitch as if to purl, and we're going to purl those 2 stitches together and drop them off each of their left hand needles. So again, into the back stitch as if to purl, into the front stitch as if to purl, and purl those 2 stitches together before we drop them off the left hand needle. And if you knit continental style, into the back stitch as if to purl, into the front stitch as if to purl, and purl those 2 stitches together off the left needle. Back stitch as if to purl, front stitch as if to purl, and purl 2 together. So since I'm a continental knitter, this is my preferred method, but you certainly can work it from the knit side if you like. And again, you can work them one stitch at a time, or you can pick them all up and then work them together all at once. But either way, from the right side, look at that lovely welt that we're creating. Super fun. All right, I hope you enjoyed this lesson today. Thank you so much for watching.